Welcome to a new episode of the Tolkien Experience podcast. I'm Luke Shelton.
I'm Sarah Westvik.
And I'm Sarah Brown.
Each episode, we share with you an interview of a Tolkien scholar or fan.
That's right. In these interviews, one of us asks our guests to respond to 6 questions that help us learn about their personal Tolkien experience.
All of this is made possible by our supporters on Patreon. So we want to thank them and encourage you to check out the community at patreon.com/Tolkien Experience.
We are so excited to share this podcast with you. So without any more delay, let me introduce our guest. For this special episode of the Tolkien Experience podcast, we actually put together a panel to discuss the music that's been released for the Rings of Power. Now, you'll recognize most of the names on the panel, but there is one special guest that we haven't had on the podcast before. So let me introduce all of our panelists. First, we have James Tauber, who was our guest in Season 1. He's the creator of Digital Tolkien, and he's also an avid music aficionado on both the production side as well as the creation side. We also have our co-host, Sarah Westvik, and in addition to their role as a co-host for the podcast, they also serve as an officer for the Tolkien Society, and they've also been involved in a lot of music over the years. And our final panelist, one that's new to this podcast, is Will Sherwood. Will Sherwood currently serves as the education officer of the Tolkien Society. He completed a master's degree on British Romanticism and Tolkien, and he also is a secondary teacher where he teaches both English and music. So these 3 individuals were having conversations on social media, and we decided, wouldn't it be great for us to have a conversation that's a bit more interactive? So without any further ado, let's get straight into the panel talking about the music of the Rings of Power. So my name is Luke Shelton, and I'm one of the co-hosts of Tolkien Experience, and that's a podcast and a project where we dig into the different ways that people experience Tolkien's work and adaptations of it. And so we had a couple friends who were having a conversation on social media, and we decided, why don't we just make this into a panel discussion where we could actually have a lot more interaction. And so I'm joined by 3 phenomenal guests. The first is Will Sherwood, who is the Education Secretary of the Tolkien Society. He's completed an MA on British Romanticism and Tolkien, and he currently serves as an English and music teacher in secondary education. We have James Tauber, who currently teaches at least one course at Signum University. He also has a lot of interest in music, both music business and music production. And we also have Sarah Westvik, who's one of my co-hosts of the Tolkien Experience and also has a long history with music appreciation and music theory. And so I thought we could get these 3 great minds together for a very interesting discussion about the music for the Rings of Power. And so with that, I'll let the 3 of you take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Luke.
Super. So did we want to open by touching on Lord of the Rings music of the past?
I think so, because there's such expectation, sentimentality, unavoidable associations with the music that's gone on in the past. So I think let's start there.
Yeah.
Howard Shore's score, of course, for Academy Award-winning score for Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson films.
Did you guys know as well that so obviously he won the best score for Fellowship, yes. But the reason why Two Towers wasn't nominated and therefore couldn't win, because it would have, is because it repeated music from Fellowship of the Ring. Yes. So the whole point behind it was, well, there is new music in there, but it uses music from a different film that's been previous. So how do we actually go around this? So they kind of took Two Towers off, and they had a year to kind of process and work out what on earth they were going to do. Then when it came to Return of the King, they were like, yeah, we got to give it a chance. Which is a shame, because that could have won 3 Oscars.
Absolutely.
That would have been beautiful.
Absolutely.
Would have outdone Star Wars, maybe? But yeah, so Howard Shore's music, obviously renowned for putting together a significant amount of thematic material. So using something called a leitmotif that he kind of drew from the German composer Richard Wagner, as well. So a leitmotif basically being a musical melody, an idea, doesn't have to be a melody, it could be 3 notes.
A rhythm.
Uses 3-note ones as well. Yeah. So just a musical identity for a character, a idea, an item, a place as well. We see that frequently as well. So he had, I think, just around 60 in the Lord of the Rings, and then in the Hobbit films as well. This, 80 plus, easily, closer to 100 perhaps. So a significant amount of thematic material that he was able to develop. Some very famous pieces within that as well concerning hobbits, I think, is kind of like the one that most people are most likely going to recognize as well. So when it comes to Shore's shadow over this, there have been a lot of people kind of discussing, is Bear McCreary going to kind of, do a musical nod to Shore? And it's awkward sometimes in film and TV music because, Marvel is a perfect example where, like, Thor has had about 4 or 5 different four different composers, and he's had 4 different themes. So his musical journey is extremely disjunct and it doesn't make any sense. Captain America has more in there because Alan Silvestri kind of covered the majority of it. So the big question musically, are we going to have continuity? And obviously we had Sarah, you got me onto this. There's a short interview with Bear McCreary. What did he say in that interview?
Yeah, he basically said, it was very short. It was just a couple of minutes. And he was discussing the notion of continuity with Shore's work. And it was interesting because his idea was to basically have echoes of what the themes would evolve into. So it was kind of like in the way that, the second age is supposed to be a notion of Middle Earth before it's formed into what it's going to look like in the third age. He was kind of trying to have that conceptualized in the score as well. And so he was talking about how there would be like echoes of some of the leitmotifs or perhaps the instrumentation in the concerning Hobbits theme or the other themes associated with the Hobbits within the themes for the Harfoots in the TV show. One that I particularly liked that he talked about was for Numenor, because obviously, Numenor, it's something that we don't really have continuity for in Lord of the Rings, because by the time we get to it, it's Gondor at that time is the last kind of vestige of Numenor, and it has its own themes that are very tied to its contemporary story. And so what I liked about how he described Numenor was basically coming up with a new kind of score with all of these new instruments, which I thought was really interesting. I'm really curious to see what he's going to actually include with the new instruments. But he said that we'll hear them, and the intention is that you'll notice them, and then when you listen to Shore's score for Lord of the Rings, you'll notice that those instruments are gone. So I think there's going to be this interesting, like weaving a fabric and then plucking a thread out of it. And when you pluck the thread out, I feel like that's going to be where it ties into Shore's legacy. So
that's a really interesting idea. The idea that for the Hobbits, you want to go to something more primitive and earlier, but for Numenor, you almost want to go over the top and require subtraction to get you to Gondor. Yeah, that's
it's classic word painting kind of ideas, which is my favorite kind of musicality.
I did a random moment a while ago where I tried to do my own Numenor theme, and I based it on the Gondor theme and kind of like trying to make it a bit more majestic. And it kind of ended up sounding a bit more like the Fellowship theme in a few ways. So I'll leave it to Bear. Well, actually, I suppose we all know Howard Shore. Do we all know Bear McCreary? So like James, we've and Sarah, actually, we've spoken about different shows at different points. Could you tell us a little bit about Bear and?
Yeah, so my first experience with Bear's music was Battlestar Galactica. And that was a really interesting period for television music. I can remember 3 TV shows in particular. We had Bear McCreary's work on Battlestar Galactica. Around the same time was Ramin Djawadi's work on Prison Break. Of course, Ramin went on to do Game of Thrones and Westworld. And that was also the time that Michael Giacchino was scoring Lost. Michael's an older, 10 years, 12 years older than Bear. Both Bear and Ramin were quite young composers in 2004, 2005. And that was my first experience with Bear. And I remember that all 3 of them at that time were introducing a lot more percussion in its own right in the shows. It was a memorable period of television composing history, I think. And of course, we know other stuff Bear's done since, which I'm sure we'll get to, Will, because you and I have talked about it before. But I'll let Sarah talk about her introduction to Bear.
I'm not any way obsessed with this man's music at all.
Well, it's so good and so good, and he's so good at capturing like whatever world he's tasked to capture in his music, I think. So my main introduction to Bear, what I know him from, is Black Sails, which is also like one of my favorite TV shows to ever exist. It's so good, and actually, like for me, because knowing how intricate like the storytelling of that production is, and how good the production design is, and how well the music fits into that, like was partly why I was so encouraged that he was pegged as like the main series composer, not the theme composer, the series composer. Because in Black Sails, the music is it's innovative. So he uses like period instruments, fiddles, hurdy-gurdies, but he mixes it up with electric guitar, which works really well for pirates, actually. And yet it all fits so nicely within the world and the aesthetic that they're trying to capture for that series. And so that's why I was really encouraged, because I felt that hopefully we'd see that kind of innovation married to a sensibility for the aesthetic of the world that's being created in Rings of Power. Because the Black Sails score is so good. It's so good.
I've only listened to the main theme, but I mean, just the hurdy-gurdy, that's all that was.
It's terrific. Listen to Parsons' Farewell from that soundtrack. It is chef's kiss. It's so good.
I will put it on the listening set list. I think for me, like my main first significant encounter with Bear, where I was aware of him as the composer, was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And having kind of been following what's been going on with the MCU as an interesting project within the film industry itself, and a poor exploration of music, I'd argue, other than the consistent use of Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme. So Bear was taken on to do the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And kind of like Sarah and James, what you've been saying, like percussion, his wanting to actually not just use generic orchestral instruments or a little bit of synth or electronic stuff. He really does his research. And what I quite like about Bear, there's multiple things. He has a blog where he actually he kind of quotes some of the key themes, and he tells you a bit about the theme, how he came to write it, why he places it where he does. And he also has a video blog on YouTube. I'd highly recommend checking it out. There's some incredible stuff. He also, Battlestar Galactica, he is playing one of the pieces solo on piano. And it just kind of shows you he's not just a composer, like he is a performer as well. But he was looking at so many different types of instruments, and the actual players, when they came to perform his music just for a TV show, they were consistently stretched to their limits, either rhythmically, harmonically, or the techniques that he wanted them to do with a specific instrument. It almost kind of foreshadows Hans Zimmer to a degree with his experimentation on Interstellar and the most recent Dune, which won the Oscar for Best Score, if I recall that correctly. So yeah, that was significant. And James and I, one of our top loves is Foundation as well. It's just absolutely insane. If you've not listened to the theme from Foundation, go listen to that. It will give you a really, really good idea of what Bear can do and what to maybe anticipate, because some of the harmonic language, some of the harmonies, the chords he uses in Foundation, just the title theme he's going to be bringing, and we've already seen it already.
Yep, definitely.
So that's the composer. Legend.
So should we talk about what we've heard from Rings of Power so far?
Yeah.
When did we had two themes drop or pieces drop, and then we of course had the suite performed at San Diego Comic-Con. What were your reactions? Which did you hear first? Had you heard the music drops?
I heard Sauron first because a friend had sent it to me, and obviously that was going to be the first one that I listened to because that's my favorite character. So.
Yeah, Sauron as well. Sarah sent me a message. It was like, "You do realize the music is available?" I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" So I was at the pub. The teaching year had finished, so we were out having a drink, and I just put it on full blast on my phone and just completely geeked out. And that was it. And then kind of later on realized that Galadriel's was released as well. So
yeah. And we'll go into quite a bit of detail. Yeah. So I heard Sauron first, and then Galadriel. And it's interesting that the contrast between them. I think a lot of people have said this, that Galadriel took a bit longer for a lot of people to get into. What did you two feel the same way? I mean, I was surprised. I was surprised by Galadriel. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we go deeper into Galadriel. Whereas Sauron to me was far closer to what I was expecting. I think the ties with Shore are a lot clearer in Sauron. They're there in Galadriel as well, but there were some surprises in Galadriel that I'm sure we'll get into.
I took to Galadriel very quickly. I really enjoyed it. I thought, this is kind of familiar. I think familiar territory is probably what I would use to describe the musical language, the instrumentation, his approach to the character. Sauron, like you've said, I think my impression is maybe he just had more fun with it. It's always kind of like, you want to be the baddies. They get it's that joke about the baddies get the most fun. And I think kind of like musically as well, this is almost kind of, you can experiment a little bit more. What exactly is the psychological state of Sauron, and how are you going to explore that musically? And I don't want to give too much away because we've got so many.
Yes, we'll talk a lot about it. What about the suite though that we heard at San Diego Comic-Con? I
liked it. we are obviously going to discuss it, but I loved the opening, and I think I've got a clear idea of what that is. I thought the performance of Sauron, it's better hearing it live. I think I keep on going back to that recording. There's a really good recording of it, and it just sounds a lot rawer and tenacious there. You've got the kind of necromancer-esque wizard, I think, in that live performance than you have on the recording.
Yeah,
but that's the nature of live music,
of course,
as well.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah?
I really enjoyed the suite as well. Of course, we'll talk more about it later, but I was very impressed by the introduction. I have to say, in general, the way that the themes are arranged in the suite, as well as the way they're arranged in the trailer, I really enjoyed because of the way there interweaves both Galadriel and Sauron's themes. In fact, he layers them on top of each other in the trailer, and he doesn't exactly do that in the suite, but he gets close to it. And I really enjoyed that too, because they work very well together. Which yeah, I just really like that. I like when music is unified enough, like within the corpus that it's written in, that you can weave the the melodies or the rhythms in between different songs. Like for me, that was a big strength of Shore's work, was that the leitmotifs were so like movable and like stackable and everything. And that's what made it a very unified, like operatic kind of score. And so I just liked seeing that. Obviously, we don't know how the score is going to be constructed in its fullness. The album does drop in August, so we'll know then. The first album drops in August, then we'll find out. But if it's anything, if this is any indication of how well intertwined the themes are, then I'm extremely optimistic about the rest of the soundtrack, because I liked that suite. Yes.
How about you, James?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've got anything to add about the suite itself. It's going to be interesting when the full soundtrack drops, just how much of a spoiler that's going to be. I mean, sometimes even just the cue names are enough, right? Sometimes I almost want to avoid the cue names and just listen to the music without having the cue names at first.
It became a tradition where with Game of Thrones, the score was always released the week before the finale.
Yes.
So when you got what's it called? Light of the Seven.
Light of the Seven.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's released, and you get this 9 minute long piece of music in it.
Yes.
So, but the way that the themes are used by Diwaji is just, James, like James said, you can kind of predict almost what's going to happen.
Right.
But it'll be interesting, like Ludwig Göransson with
the Mandalorian,
that we've all spoken about. He obviously did that in volumes, so I'm tempted. I'm almost interested, maybe if. Considering how much possible music there will be for this, maybe he does it in volumes.
Yeah.
Which would be the best option.
I hope so. I just have to say, with regard to the Mandalorian music, for those of you who haven't heard it, the last cue in season 2 is what it's Ludwig completely flexing. Like the whole time he's had this really cool, he's got recorders and he's got guitars and everything. And it's like, this is really awesome. I loved his stuff in Community as well. And it's just kind of got this really, I think, new feel to it. And then in that final cue in The Mandalorian, it breaks into this massively contrapuntal, it was like a Bach cantata using the main theme of The Mandalorian. And I'm like, oh my, it was like, I worship this man. Just the flexing he did to basically say, oh yeah, you want me to do a Bach chorale? I can do that. Using the main theme of The Mandalorian. Yeah, incredible stuff. Anyway,
and Community, what a great show!
Oh, Community, yeah, exactly.
The music is incredible. I really wish he'd released more of the score than just a general soundtrack.
Agreed.
So we've kind of we've spoken about like our overviews and our general ideas so far about the suite and the music. Shall we get into the actual analysis?
Absolutely. Yes. We want to start with Galadriel?
Sarah?
What do you think?
I was wondering if maybe we just park those two, because obviously
you want
to forward to it.
Okay.
But they're going to take a while. So do we want to maybe just touch base with the material that we haven't actually been given a title for?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, it's my first theory. So the opening that we have spoken about, I think my theory is this is the theme for Khazad-dûm. My reason for believing this is Shore's motif and music for Moria is built on what we call consecutive fifths. So now what I am going to do, you'll see some other stuff, but bear with me. This, no, not that one. Not that one. Not that one.
Spoiler alert. Not a spoiler alert.
Right. Okay, spoiler alert again. Right, consecutive fifths. So let's start with a fifth. So a fifth basically means that there are two notes that are a fifth apart. So for example, I'm going to take this note here that my mouse is over. That is called a D note. And a fifth up for that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is A. So they're a fifth apart. So if you play these two notes, also these are also known as power chords. If you play them on guitar, there's no what we call a third. So there's no F or F sharp. And what it does, it leaves an openness to it. There's no sense of where are we musically, or how are we supposed to feel about this music. So there's less of a direction. And that kind of openness, but also emptiness to it is very important. That's the reason why Shaw wanted it. But it also is a place of strength. So anyone kind of learning the piano, or a lot of the time kind of like in the left hand for piano work, you might have the D, an A, and then maybe on top another D. So you're playing those three notes constantly on the piano.
They're the most secure notes of the scale, right? Yeah. Because it doesn't matter what mode you're in, though you almost always find the fifth as well as the tonic. So yeah, it's solid.
Exactly. And so and James said, so D would be the tonic. It's the root note. And then the fifth is known as the dominant. So obviously an important note. So Shaw uses this as a place of strength to reflect the dwarves' empire, but unfortunately the empire has fallen, so it's open, it's hollow, just like Moria is. There's a sense of sorrow to it as well. And when you then get to the Balrog scene, Balrog was in the trailer. When you get to the Balrog scene, what he then does is he builds these fifths up. So, for example, when the Balrog's sword smashes, you've got this bum, 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 and this is the Dwarven music. They're singing in Dwarven, Kursdal as well. It's this fight, and the dwarves are there in the fifths. So, getting to my point. The opening music starts on a G and a D. So G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a fifth, which then kind of draws us into the music for the Hobbit film, where the theme music for the dwarves, which I'm only going to slightly point out, gets only slightly repetitive the more you listen to it, goes down one note. So it goes down to the note next to it. So for example, Thorin's theme, the root note is A, and it goes down to G and back up to A. So that is an important correlation and musical meaning for the dwarves. A to G, back to A. Now, if we put this onto G, this is what Bear has done. He goes from G to F, back to G.
Mm-hmm.
Da, da, da. So literally he's taking the same idea, but there's a sense of majesty about it. It's glorious. There's the percussion that James was talking about. You've got a full choir this time. It's not just the men at the depths of their voices. And then da, 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 goes up to the A flat. So I'm trying to indicate with my mouse as well. But it's constantly fifths. Now, I use the word consecutive, and what I mean by consecutive is both the fifths are moving in the same way. So they go from a fifth to a fifth to a fifth. So the classical musicians, if you've ever done a Bach cantata, Bach chorale, like James was saying earlier, consecutive fifths are generally a big no-no. but here it's about strength. So that is my major theory, that this is the theme for Khazad-dûm. I don't think it's Numenor, although the fifth is important for the Gondor theme. This just screams dwarvish music to me.
It's a compelling argument.
I've not thought about that at all. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I really like that theory. I don't know if I've settled on particularly like what it could be, but the musical legacy, I think, to Shore that you've drawn is quite clear. So it could very well be the dwarven theme. I personally was very struck by that beginning as well for a different reason, because for me the opening, it was also something I noticed in the Sauron theme. So I'll bring that back when we talk about the Sauron theme, was what seems to be a John Williams influence as well in the score, because the opening for this suite that Will was describing just now, it reminds me so much of the opening of Duel of the Fates. Because in Duel of the Fates, the melody goes Koramata, but is that opening where, and here it goes up. It doesn't go down, but it goes up. But it's that same full choir, the men and the women, all singing together, with a very similar rhythm as well. Is that da 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 again? And so like I really liked that, because I'll also point it out later in the Sauron theme, it reminds me of Battle of the Heroes from Revenge of the Sith. This is all prequel stuff. And just for me as a Star Wars prequels fan, I really liked it because I like it. For me, it evokes the same kind of emotions, right? Because the storytelling for those films as well was, we have this great, glorious republic, and we're about to see it fall and collapse into darkness. And so I really like that, intentional or not, the choices that Bear has made for that particular cue, as well as the cue that I'll talk about in Sauron, is that it makes an association with an existing kind of just more broad, like oral legacy of cinema, that fans can associate with, even if they've not necessarily, if they're not like say they're new to the Tolkien franchise, they've never watched the films before or anything. It's a way to instantly like evoke for me similar stories and therefore similar emotions, and you go like, ooh, we're listening to something fateful here, right? Something intense, something big is about to go down. So I just wanted to point that out, because that was something that jumped out to me straight away. It was the first thing I was like, am I listening to Duel of the Fates? No, I'm not. Am I? So it was pretty cool. I liked that moment. Yeah. What about you, James? What did you think of that?
I didn't necessarily have the same association, but that's probably more lack of familiarity with the prequel score.
What? James!
I don't know how to react to that other than that.
Oh, well, I'm older.
Oh!
Ouch.
I saw Empire in the cinema.
Get out.
I don't know if we can continue this live stream anymore, James.
I didn't say I didn't like it. I just said not as familiar with it.
So we've got James's notes. Yeah, we can continue without him.
Yes, apparently.
Exactly.
It's okay, James. You can stay.
That's right. Thank you. I appreciate it. What more do we want to say about the suite?
Okay, so the last thing I'd to say is, after Sauron's theme, there's a repeated melody. It's in the violin, and it kind of goes to the strings. This is it uses. I can't place it. I don't know what it could be, but it sounds pretty good. Like, it's identifiable as well, I think, which is also kind of important. You like the Shire music,
like it's memorable. It's something you would recognize it if you heard it again.
Yeah, exactly. It's what makes a good melody? Well, if it's forgotten,
right?
Is it good? It's loads of questions that you can have about that. But I'm just going to share my screen very quickly just to show them what I mean by this. So the theme, which has got me a bit stuck, it includes what we call a major seventh. So you literally apply the same idea. I've already worked it out on piano as well. So I know it starts on an F, which is where my mouse is so far. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And a major seventh basically means that it is the closest white or black note on the piano to the root. So here's your F, here's your F, there's your major seventh. So it's not a full octave. So it's not to do with strength.
There's a tension there because you're so close to the stability of the octave. Yeah.
It's like you're so close but so far away. It's also what we call a leading tone as well. So in Western classical music, you would expect the major seventh to always what we call resolve. So the tension would disappear onto the root. Now he doesn't do that. There's this I'm not going to sing it, but you've got F up to E, down to D, B, C, D, E flat. So you've got this kind of questionable tonality. Where are we? What is the mood of the music? What key is it? It's almost more tempting to say that it's just a tone. The tonal center is F, which just simply means that F isn't the most important note harmonically. It's just a note that is kind of keeping the strings together. It might be a ronde's theme, but it doesn't sound something that you could be blasting out with horns or brass. I've looked through all the themes. The only theme that actually features a major seventh is Shelob's theme. So who knows what that could lead to?
Might be a creature theme.
Maybe, I don't know, Ents, or maybe The Stranger as well, because it's got a sense of kind of it being lost as well. And as to exactly who the stranger is, who knows?
Yeah. And the stranger doesn't even seem to necessarily know, like there's a sort of a displacement and sense of confusion and everything.
Yeah. And like the actor said, like you're like he has a clear purpose, but it's just like getting to that end point. So it's still that kind of idea of
trying to resolve, but not quite. Yeah, trying to get there, but
exactly. Like we have a target, we know what comes next, but we're not there. So
There we go. But yeah, that's it. I know I've just spoken about the suite, but those are my theories.
Yeah.
There's already so much to talk about, and it's just the suite.
So much.
Well, should we dive into Galadriel's theme now?
Oh, certainly. Yes. Who would like to start with Galadriel?
Well, let me say a couple of things. I'll bring up my chord analysis eventually, but I do want to say one thing that I first noticed, and other people on Twitter have told me they agree. When I heard this, I immediately thought of Alan Menken, the composer of so much Disney music in the 90s, the sort of golden age of animation. Little Mermaid and Aladdin, and which seems weird, right? This is what I mean by I was surprised by Galadriel. I don't at all mean I didn't like it, but it had certain qualities to it that, and chord progressions in particular, that just felt so Alan Menken, Disney, but Alan Menken in particular. And I was sort of nervous about saying that because that seems really weird to say, oh, it reminded me of Disney. But when I mentioned Alan Menken on Twitter, everyone's like, yeah, I thought so too. I just didn't know whether I should say anything. So it's interesting in that sense. It's got that very, there's definitely a lot of soul searching or something. There's definitely a sort of elements of yearning and sorrow to it as well. But it's also it does have some nice references to Shaw as well. I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the chords there, particularly the sort of descending thirds, the mediant kind of the F minor to the D flat major to the B flat minor that and that opening. I mean, the opening harp and the choir again references a lot of Elvish music as well in Shaw's score.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I think if when we're talking about these musical associations as well, what jumped out to me in a similar vein to what you described about Alan Menken was, that the melody, I know a lot of people on socials are kind of saying that it sounds like the tune for Reflection from Mulan.
Yep.
But for me, actually, the first association that I made was to Pavane for a Silent Night by Ravel, which I have sung before with a choir back home. For me, I really liked that association because for me that tune has always been like a mix of because it's Ravel. Ravel was, he was composing during the 19th century. It's the Romantics. It's this very romantic yearning, which for me feels very apt for the elves. Yes. If you want to do be inspired by any composer, I feel like Ravel is perfect for the elves, especially during the Second Age. Well, so I really liked that effect, and kind of because it was like Pavane for a Silent Night, from this is just a personal association, but it therefore evoked a nostalgia for me, and that's also a great emotion to evoke for the elves.
Well, I was going to sorry, go on. Well,
you go, James.
Yeah.
You go.
So I was just going to say it's really interesting that I think this often is the case where we make an association with a recent composer, like an Alan Menken or a John Williams, but really what we're doing is making the association to the inspiration for them. Mm-hmm. So Alan Menken may have been very inspired by Ravel, right? John Williams was, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, Will, Holst in particular, right? There's so much of Holst that, and Wagner as well. So I almost get a sense of we go, oh, that sounds like John Williams, but it actually sounds like Holst. Or, we say, oh, that sounds like Alan Menken, but it actually sounds like Ravel. I wonder if there's sort of that sense here as well. Yeah.
Definitely. And I suppose also we could, if we're saying Star Wars, for whatever reason, you can push it back to Stravinsky, Korngold.
Yes, Korngold, yes, of course.
As well. So, but Sarah, so when we were talking about Ravel, when you were talking about the Pavane, for some reason, I wasn't clicking that you had said Ravel. Do you know the original name for Ravel? What did you call it? Pavane for
a Silent Night.
Do you know the original name for that when he did it? So it was originally written for piano. Pavane for a Dead Princess. And when he orchestrated it, which a lot of pianists go to because it indicates the kind of tone that Ravel was after, he actually has a horn playing the melody for the first one. Hint, hint, hint.
Hint.
I mean,
my God.
Everyone should be listening to Ravel. He is just earth-shatteringly amazing. But can I chip in? I'll make it quick, but can I chip in with one further point about kind of linking and what people thought about this? So in the comments, Higgy Baby has said about how there was a moment when Galadriel's theme reflects Gail Dornick's theme from Foundation. So when Gale leaves Synax. And now what's absolutely fantastic about Bear is on his website, like I said, he's got the main themes for shows and films. So if you look here, for example, here's Gale's theme. Now,
hello.
This is what we call a minor seventh.
Can we bring that up alongside my transcription of Galadriel's theme?
Oh my goodness, I don't know if we can. I can put my Galadriel's theme up.
Sure.
So,
well, I've got the chords though. So can you? I posted it to Twitter if you can, or I can. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. It's just it would be worth looking because it's not just this theme. Even the themes, even the main title theme of see, I've got just the theme by itself, which might be easier to.
Yeah. how
That's okay. We can come back. We can come back to it. There's definitely foundation vibes in Galadriel's theme too.
It's literally
like
you've got
theme, main title. Yeah.
Da 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 da. So that da. There's your minor seventh, which if I put Gale's theme into F minor, you've got da 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 da. So literally the opening is exactly the same. So Higgy baby, you're completely right. That he's linking these themes together.
This is also a good moment to say they're also the opening notes of the Interstellar. I can't remember the cue in Interstellar.
Oh, it's the love theme between the father and the daughter.
Yeah.
Minor seventh. Yeah,
but that da 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 da. But and he plays around actually with the ambiguity of minor versus major, because then it goes da 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 da. Right, it changes to the major there as well.
Yeah. And also that minor set. I suppose we are starting to analyze the melody,
which we'll get to.
Yeah, but that minor seventh is consistently associated with distance, because it's so far away from the root without feeling like it needs to go back to the root. So
it's that yearning.
As a melody, you want that
yearning.
If you want a sense of distance. And I suppose obviously Galadriel, she's heartbroken about home, Beleriand, as well from the first age. So that minor seventh really, really works.
Yeah, the homesick interval. Almost.
Exactly. Oh, homesick! What a great way of saying it.
Which again, this all ties back as well to the Alan Menken use. I mean, it's just so funny when the Ravel, the original title having the word princess. Alan Menken using this stuff so often to represent princesses. Galadriel being a princess. It's that's the link here. I think it's
we connected the dots, guys.
you can see the tradition. Now, obviously, is a very Western tradition as well that Bear is playing into, as well with the melody, but also they're kind of like the da 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 da. There's what we call a sequence in music. So you take a small idea and then you repeat it, but you either go up or down. So it could build tension, or in this case, you've got this kind of sense of the fall, which you can take it as many ways as you want. One way I was thinking about it is this idea that it's almost like the decline of the elves. As well. So the fact that Galadriel is fighting tooth and nail throughout the show, and we know she's going to be a fighter, but she's fighting against the long defeat, to use a quote from Fellowship of the Ring. As well. So there is that mournful fall there. But and James, I know you're going to talk about the chords as well, but da 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 da, that triumphant rise back up.
Let me actually bring up that because we're talking about it now, so I may as well bring up the music.
Look at that beauty.
So there we go. But yeah, so the sequence here, right? You've got these four notes that are repeated, then a tone lower here. You get a similar thing here. This sort of pattern, this little arch pattern that just falls down. It's interesting that the first half, so this is in two halves. And follows a somewhat similar progression each time, except that at the halfway point it resolves to a major. At the end it goes back to the relative minor. It's almost this sense of there's hope, but no, we end up back to where we started in the F minor.
That's a really interesting idea.
There are some very, I don't know how technical to get here, but there are a lot of there's a lot of Menkisms here to me, right? These chord progressions, and this whole one that I've debated in my mind about multiple ways of spelling this, but this kind of way that the D flat goes to this almost diminished, but not quite, because it's got a major third in it. That's a very I don't want to say cliche response to going from the 4 to the 1, but I mean, the Beatles did it. It's a very you get that a lot, kind of, if you're in the key of C, having the kind of F major and then the F the F minor sixth or something before going back to the C. But that gets done here as well. I know you had a question on Twitter, Will, about the Neapolitan.
Yeah.
Did you want to bring that up here, or is that getting too?
It does kind of get into the chords a little bit, but what you were saying actually about the kind of the cliche kind of nature of it, but cliches are there because they work, and especially music as well. If you go on to 12-tone, Tarantacruel, there are so many good musicians that I love watching their videos because they go into the musical analysis.
Yep.
But this is like a cliche from a love song. Yes. Because when you've got the end of Bohemian Rhapsody, perfect example.
Yes, yep.
That is this perfect example of kind of like a love.
Yep.
That has not been fulfilled, or
which is why it comes up in the Alan Menken stuff as well, because it features so often in the song that the princess is singing when she is trying to work out who she is, or who she's going to be with, or whatever.
Yeah. So it is a cliche, but it works. So we know, like, that is telling us who Galadriel is at this moment. She is still her youthful self.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is that descending third, that F minor, D flat, B flat minor progression, where each of these chords only differs in one note, and you're kind of removing the top one and adding one at the third bottom. Right? You can sort of on a keyboard, if you played this, the F minor, you just take away the top C and introduce the D flat at the bottom, and you get the D flat. And then you drop the F and you add the B flat, and you get the B flat minor. There's that's actually a chord progression that Howard Shore uses multiple times in the context of Elves, particularly sung by when sung with a choir as well. That chord progression. I'm trying to think where that's featured.
I think it's Arwen.
Arwen, yes.
Arwen Revealed, which actually, very interestingly, the opening of this really reminded me of Arwen Revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Da, 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 da,
yes.
Da. There was really a sense of Arwen in there, which obviously they are related as well. Right. So there we go.
On the topic of Arwen, that was also something I noticed with the instrumentation at the beginning of Galadriel and with the chords, because you had, for one thing, you had the harp, as well as the chorus, which was primarily high female voices.
Yep.
And that was very evocative of the opening to Even Star. The one that's the in the background, though, the choir and the harp are doing basically exactly what they're doing with the Galadriel, and the initial opening chords are the same. It's the minor sixth, and then it's the fourth chord of the key. So I just thought that was a really like nice way as well of, again, like grounding it within that oral legacy, tying it back to Odwin, which, you know, as you said, Will, it's perfect because it's so grandma. So it's pretty excellent. I really enjoyed that aspect of again, like Bear being so like able to include nods to Shore's legacy without letting it like overpower what he's trying to do as well. I feel like this was a really nice example of being able to do that.
Yeah, it's and also kind of like talking about what you're saying about like nods back, and there's interestingly, so it's important as well to note that when Galadriel's theme first appears, it's on a horn.
Yes,
this is a very deliberate choice. So when you're thinking about Western classical music, the horn, yes, it's linked with hunts. Yes, we know that, but actually it's also the consistently, specifically in the 19th century, when you've got the Romantic period, it's consistently used for heroes. Mm-hmm. It's always the heroic instrument. And I think the most important example we could really feed this back to is Richard Wagner's Die Ring der Nibelungen, where the third opera of the cycle, Siegfried, the horn features most significantly for his theme. Da, 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 da. Consistently, the horn represents the hero. Mm-hmm. And sure, the first time we hear the Minas Tirith theme, yes, the do 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 do. I'm going to get sued so much for this. But the first time Minas Tirith, not Gondor, Minas Tirith's theme features, it's on a horn. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As well. And when the hobbits are climbing, actually, when the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, what is the Hobbit theme played on? A horn. As well. A horn is a very deliberate choice here. It's a very clear nod back to Western tradition and to Shore as well.
Yep.
Lovely.
Anything more you want to say about...
Could I share my screen?
Yes, go for it.
So going from the melody and I'm going here. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong one. Right, so jumping off what James has just been talking about as well with chords. Now, I'm on the right one. So Howard Shore, his Lothlorien theme, if you look at... I don't know if you can see this because you'll probably see my screen, but the music of the Lord of the Rings films by Doug Adams, he does a very good, detailed but accessible read of all of Howard Shore's music. And what he identifies is that Shore appears, he doesn't say he definitely does, he just says it feels like Shore is using one of these scales. So he kind of identifies the Makam Hijaz, which I've got here at the bottom. So what I've done is I've circled in red very key, distinct intervals that I can then point to, but it's not just for this. We'll come on to Sauron.
I was going to say Sauron's theme. That's very important.
So much. So the Makam Hijaz in Arabic music tradition, this is a very important scale, but you've got this E flat to an F sharp. Now this is symbolized here. So there's your E flat, here's your F sharp. Now, in Western music tradition, this is what we refer to as an augmented second. So a second, if that's your E, there's your minor second. Right next to it, your major second is a bit higher. Your augmented second means you just take that second a bit higher. Now, the perfect example of this is the Evil of the Ring, Sauron's theme. You've got the da 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 da. Those last two notes, that it sounds Oriental, it sounds Eastern to the Western music tradition. And notice that I consistently use Western just to try and delineate that there are very clear different forms of music, theory and analysis. But you've got that. But Shaw seems also kind of like well, the Makam Hijaz, it's similar, not completely the same, but it's similar to the Western Phrygian modal scale as well. So you'll notice that E flat there is the same, but the F sharp isn't there. So this is the only note that actually is the difference between the Makam Hijaz and the Phrygian modal scale. However, when you move on to the octatonic scale, which is also...
I was going to say, because the fun thing about the Sauron theme is it has both.
Oh, it does. And we'll come to that later. But what's important, yes, you have that F there, but you also have this augmented second still in place. So you've still got that E flat and you've still got that F sharp. Now, this is based on the fact that the root note for these three scales are D. They can be moved around onto any note whatsoever. But the whole point is that there is an augmented second. So that, and Bear, he doesn't, for Galadriel, he's not using the Makam Hijaz. He is not using the octatonic scale. However, he is using the Phrygian modal scale for the harmony, not the melody, but the harmony. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, if we are in the key of F minor, there's my cheeky little F right there. Now, F minor includes a G, that little note right there. But in the harmony, the fourth chord, so if you count them, not the da, 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 da. That was terrible. But the fourth chord includes a G flat, this one here. So from the F to the G flat. Now you'll notice in Phrygian, so in the Phrygian, you also have that flat, that minor second rise, and it gives a lift to the music, a sense of freshness, joy, but hopefulness as well. So I think he's playing a bit with the harmonic language that Shaw was also playing with. It's a little nod. It's not. It's not.
Is that reflected in the chord analysis that I did of the theme, or is that happening somewhere else in the Galadriel?
No, you've got it in there. The G flat major chord.
Oh, of course, the G flat. Okay, yes. Yeah. So I'll just quickly. So
yeah,
for people that can read, yeah.
But yeah, it's
here. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There you go. So it's just interesting that he's got these very. You know what? If Bear's watching this, then I really, really hope we are not making him mad. Or he's just looking at us like, what are you talking about? Like, this is what does Tolkien say? He's reader application. These readers are applying way too much.
Applicability rather than
applicability. That's the word. Not application. Applicability. Yeah, we are being applicable all over the place right now. So yeah,
I was just checking that I had picked up on the correctly picked up on that flattened second.
Yeah,
but yeah, there it is. Excellent.
So yeah, overall, James, I know what you're saying, but I still just feel it works. Like,
oh yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, it's not a criticism. It was just, it surprised me. It made references to a style of music which I'm now going to think of more as Ravel than Alan Menken, but it made references to a style of music I wasn't necessarily expecting. But I think in the context of everything we've said about the yearning and the homesickness and everything, that it makes a ton of sense. Right.
But what you could also like, you can see this in the SDCC suite as well. I don't think it's as prominent in the theme recording, but in the suite, you get you get her battle music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot. Yeah. So you've got the what I consider Khazad-dûm, Galadriel, Sauron, the question mark theme, and it kind of ties back into Galadriel before you get what I consider to be Khazad-dûm to end. So the final time Galadriel comes back, that has the bravery, the perseverance, the elven heroicism as well that she embodies, and but also just her sheer, I think I've used the word courage already, strength. It's there. You can hear this being a brass melody.
Mm.
It's such a strong melody.
Yes.
So, right. Shall we move on to
Sauron?
what actually everyone is here for?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Sauron. Where the hell do we start?
Okay, can I paint that?
Been in my dreams.
Okay, before we get to the meter and the chord progressions and stuff like that, let's talk about the overall structure and maybe the orchestration and instrumentation first. Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds like a very good place.
So one of the things I really like about this is it naturally divides into three.
Yeah.
Where you've got the first and the third parts feature the male choir and brass and the bass drum against an ostinato tremolo on the strings. And then in the middle, you get a female choir and lush strings. And there's this wonderful transformation that happens in between. The last third and the first third are related, but they're almost inverses of one another. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if the whole thing is playing with the transformation, the Anatar to Sauron transformation, or two sides. I'll say more once we get into the meter, because there's a swapping of the role of the complex meter. There's a swapping of the choir versus the brass as well. It's just this wonderful mirror image surrounded by this lovely string and female choir bit in the middle that I just think it's structurally wonderful.
Yeah. Sarah, what was your take on the choir? What did you feel about his use of voices in this?
So I loved, the two things that struck me were, one, the use of voices was the main one. The other one was the strings. But I'll talk about voices first, because I like the implication that you get from using a choir, because, a choir, the way that he uses it in the score is so different from the way choirs were used in Shore's Mordor themes, in my opinion. Because the choir here are the ones who introduce the melody. As James was saying, later it gets inverted, and they end up, mirroring the percussion, what the percussion is doing with their meter, and we'll talk about meter later. But when it's introduced, they're the ones who are carrying the theme. And for me, I find this extremely effective because, for me, choir conveys it's popular voice, right? It's voice. It's not a single voice. It's a group of voices singing out something with meaning. And therefore, for me, that evokes disciples rather than the kind of, screeching metal that Shore's themes is rightfully meant to evoke for Third Age Sauron. And so for me, it very neatly kind of demonstrates Sauron's Second Age tactics, which is the notion of getting, of getting and seeking out collaboration, public support to try and get what he wants, be it rings, be it, territory, be it, men from the places that are getting colonized by Numenor to go fight for him, I really like the use of choir in introducing the theme in this way. And that's why I also enjoy the fact we get both male and female choir, because also I like that we get both male and female choir. I like where they intersect with the strings as well. So in that bit in the middle is lovely, as well as at the end, the ostinato, so the repeated musical phrase that we're introduced to in the very first few seconds, which is repeated throughout the piece, that gets taken up by the strings. And I really like that because, strings can be both beautiful and aggressive. And I feel like that is a perfect mirror for the character of Sauron, especially in terms of the second age, where he oscillates between being this he's sexy Sauron at the beginning, and then he becomes horrible and evil. If your good looks don't prevail, you may try murder. So it's kind of like that. That's the vibe that I get with this like move between what you would associate as like softer or more gentle uses of choir and uses of strings that end up supporting more dramatic, more aggressive themes. Or in the case of the choir, joining the percussion, and that's why I find that middle segment that's very different from the bits with the mixed meter very effective, because it kind of harks back to the I guess like the softest ways that you could use those instruments. For me, it was very evocative of kind of like like a gothic horror movie kind of thing, like this idea of something beautiful that's like falling into decay, which is very like fallen angel. Of course, Sauron, he's a fallen Maya. Was started out good and then fell into darkness. And so I find it very effective to use what you would conventionally consider, I guess, like, beautiful instruments, and then kind of flip the notion of what they can do on their head and end up like, supporting this rather than going straight for the brass, which is like what Shore does. Not saying that's wrong. It's just, I like the way that, that Bear uses these instruments for what he's trying to convey. Yeah, that's what I think.
Makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of great ideas in there, as well. And like, it's so important, like you said, that we hear the theme first through voice.
Yeah.
As well. Like I was saying, it's how a motif is introduced is extremely important. So the Hobbit, concerning hobbits, the main theme that we associate with hobbits from Shore is on a fiddle. Fiddle or flute? I need to. Oh my goodness! I've been listening.
It's fiddle, I think.
Stop since it first came out. I don't remember.
Well, maybe it's flute actually.
I think. There's a time lag as well, so I don't know if people can be with us on this. Either way, whichever one, it's very evocative of folk, as well. So yeah, that certainly makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got tick, instrumentation. James, do you want to cover what the extremely slippery ground that is tempo and rhythm?
Absolutely. Let me just for the, rather than just throw away terms like 7/4 and stuff like that, let me draw a little diagram and talk a little bit about it. Because this is somewhat of a tour de force. It's just a wonderful example of sort of mixed meter and mixed time signature. So the Galadriel theme that we've already heard is in 4/4 that I like what I've represented at the top here, where you basically sort of have this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it's very even. Basically, you've got a beat that's divided into 2, and that just continues completely consistently. You can also divide things up, the beat into 3, and sort of have and so on. That's sometimes confusingly referred to as a compound meter, but I won't get into that. Where things become interesting is where, instead of just having a division into 2 or just having a division into 3, you actually mix them up. And so you do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or that's a 2 plus a 3. You can do it a 3 plus a 2. So you can do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 sort of thing. And this was very famously used in Holst's the planets for Mars, bringer of war. And since then, I think it's been very, very associated with kind of the march of war, the march of the enemy, and so on. And so we find it, Shaw uses exactly this 5, this 2 and 3, or 3 and 2, in the context of Isengard. And so the Isengard theme, the da 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 dun 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 dun, right? It's broken up into 5, and it's just this very consistent, driving but odd number of beats. What's really interesting about this, in my opinion, is Sauron features a division into 7, where it's basically 2 and 2 and 3. So it's a combined with, mixed with, returning to the familiar 4/4 of just a nice even and what I suspect that's trying to evoke is a much rawer, cruder form of what will eventually become the sort of driving 5 beats to the bar that we would become accustomed to with Isengard, say, or Mordor. It's like it hasn't quite found itself yet. It can't decide if it's 7 beats to the measure or 4 beats to the measure. And so we see this alternation. What's particularly interesting about it in the context of the overall Sauron piece is that when the choir starts, it only sings on the 4/4 bits. And then when it's not singing, we get into the 7 beats per measure bit. But in the second half, that reverses completely, and the choir is only singing during the 7 beats per measure bit, and not singing during the 4. So it's another way that it's playing around with this reversal from the first half to the second half, or the first third to the final third.
That's fascinating, and I really liked how you kind of tied that in as this kind of like it's a rawer. He's not found his feet yet. He's not got his military might.
He can't decide if he's in a simple meter or a complex meter. Yeah.
But what you were saying about Holst with 5/4 now. So Hans Zimmer actually got into legal battle with the Gustav Holst estate because during Gladiator, he took the references too far, you might say. So he put it in 6/4, and so the rhythm that James has just been referencing simply goes like this: da 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 da, and that's repeated. I think basically every single bar in
Mars
features that in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just da 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 da, which is when you've got the slower section. Kind of similar to how the bum features in every single bar of the Allegro con brio from Beethoven's the opening movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. So what Hans Zimmer did was this. Let me see. Da 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 da.
Yep.
Basically, he added an extra beat on. Da 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 da. So he got in legal battle over that, but also the da 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 da. He also did this. Da 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 da. So he used the chromatic movement of the horn section yet again, ladies and gentlemen, the horn section of Mars, and reduced it down and put it onto the strings to begin with. So he got in legal battle. I can't remember who won, but that was an issue. And also he has admitted that he did also take inspiration from Mars, which everyone does.
I think
Holst is important because Holst was consistently exploring meter because of Igor Stravinsky, most famously from the Rite of Spring.
Rite of Spring.
Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky. I'd really recommend it. It's a great piece of music, but the rhythm and sometimes the harmony just really makes you fidget in your seat because you're uncomfortable. You don't know what's happening. So Igor Stravinsky directly influenced Holst. So Holst is using 5/4, but he's also using 7/4. He also uses 5/2. He also uses 7/2 as well. So he explores this significantly. But further and a bit closer, Benjamin Britten, as well, in his War Requiem, uses 7/4 for the Dies Irae, the Dies Irae, Dies Irae. But he then changes it. He doesn't just simply go bum, 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 bum. He then kind of messes around with 7/4, and it's so much more awkward, but it gives you so much more freedom within it as well. It's really interesting. Shall we cover some harmony?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you want to show your?
I shall show my first slide.
Okay.
So now this is what I showed you before. So octatonic, Phrygian, and the Makam Hijaz, which Doug Adams suggested that Howard Shore was kind of using for his Lothlorien theme, the D, 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 that there being the augmented second I spoke about. Now, you'll notice the octatonic and the Makam Hijaz is still here. However, I've thrown in the double harmonic major scale on C, and I'll explain why. Now, the motifs that I've identified from Shore, there are more. Basically, anything to do with Mordor fits this. And it's to do with the minor third that James and Sarah has already identified. So the evil of the ring, the seduction of the ring, the history of the ring are all important. Evil of the ring also kind of, we know it basically as Sauron's theme because it features whenever like we see the Eye of Sauron, but it is known as the evil of the ring. It started off as that. You've also got the threat of Mordor. The power of Mordor is this dum 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 dum. This falling third. Dum 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 dum. So the falling third is important, but it's not a major third. It's not da da da, as in the Shire music. It's a minor third. It's dark. It's a bit more brooding, as well. And also, for some reason, he decided to utilize this theme to represent the entirety of Azog and the orcs in The Hobbit. There was nothing he could do with this. I noticed one moment where he tried to develop it, one moment in the entirety of The Hobbit. Should have chosen a different theme or made up a new one. This frustrated me, but this isn't about Shore. Sorry, tangent. So you come to Sauron. So for Sauron, basically, this is the Makam Hijaz that we spoke about earlier. But all he's doing is he's moving that to there. So it seems to feature more like an octatonic scale. But with the octatonic scale, you have a B, whereas here you've got a B flat. So it's not quite octatonic. It's not quite Makam Hijaz, because you don't have that F. It's not, so where does it fit? Again, Sauron doesn't fit. He's a bit too fluent and lacking in a bass. But what I also wanted to bring to the table is the double harmonic scale. So the double harmonic scale, you can see that cheeky little flat there, which links back to the Phrygian. But here, and I wanted to make a reference to Dune, the Dune soundtrack. I think it's called Herald of the Change from the Dune soundtrack. what's his name? Hans Zimmer seems to be using this as well. The dum dum da 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 da, and then from here, using notes from a D scale, he then suddenly moves to an E flat minor scale instead. So he's throwing these two scales together, which, because you've got this augmented second here and this augmented second here, comes under the double harmonic scale. So basically, Sauron doesn't fit in anywhere. It's almost like he planned it. So when you come to Sauron's theme itself, so basically what I've done, I felt that I needed more than two hands. So basically I've made a 4-hand transcription of the theme. So here you've got your dum dum, the minor third falling from the E to the C sharp, dum dum. However, here's where we start to get this Makam Hijaz. I've just forgotten it, the double harmonic scale. The dum dum da da da.
Yeah.
So you've got this awkwardness that is not a D to an F. Within this scale, I probably need to work out exactly what notes this are in my transcription, but it was easy for me to do it this way. It does not work as a D to an F. It is an augmented second. And especially when you come back to dum,
I was going to say, I did it as an E sharp. I did it as an E sharp.
Do it as an E sharp.
Yeah.
It's pretty, yeah.
It's hard. I mean, it doesn't work anyway, right? It's not a diatonic scale. I mean, it's yeah.
No. I need to make it an E sharp. That is a really good point. I can't believe I missed that. But again, here, dum 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 da da. So here, this note here, da 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 da. There's your Sauron.
Yes.
That is your direct reference to Sauron. That major seventh resolving onto the tonic. At which point, you get this dum 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 dum, but it keeps on going. Dum 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 da 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 da, and it goes back into the. So it's all over the shop. It's all over the shop. It's slippery. It's not wanting to be tied down. Mm-hmm. There is no sense of, in a Western harmonic sense, there is no sense of tonal cohesion other than what is being pounded out in the bass.
Yeah. And then when the brass comes in for the second repeat of this, you get, I think, the same, not pinning down, but harmonically. You get, I think, like an E minor going to a C sharp major, going to an A minor. There's this shifting tonal center as well. I don't know if you can bring up that part of your score to illustrate that, or it's fine. Just before the choir comes in, the female choir comes in.
Yes, I can find that. When we go to E minor.
Yeah, but it's E minor. It's literally E minor for a measure.
Dum 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 dum.
And you can see from your accidentals, right, that it just can't make up its mind. What?
Here I'm just adding a bit of musical flair. I will admit that. But it's what we call dissonant in music. If the notes don't feel like they're supposed to go together, there's a better explanation for this. But like the major seventh that we've spoken about, the augmented second, they do not sound like they go together. And Sauron's music in Shaw and for McCreary, it doesn't sound like it should go together, but it does so brilliantly.
But I was saying this is more of a kind of a chromatic median going on, where you're going from E minor to C sharp major. Right, C sharp major has that E sharp again. It doesn't have the same notes as an E minor does. So you're going down the minor third, but you're playing, because you're playing a C sharp major. You're kind of, it's this borrowed chord from the mediant, or the submediant, and so it's just this. Each measure there is not particularly problematic. It's the relationship of one chord to the chord of the next measure that's sort of all over the place and hard to pin down.
Yeah, certainly. And I liked what you said as well, kind of like the modulations, the relationship between them. So in music, so we've spoken about C sharp minor and E minor. These are two different keys. So when you're playing on the piano or whatever instrument, the scale that you're playing is based around a key, a specific note on your instrument. So the median, the third, from C, D, E, 3, median, the third. So again, but also it's a minor third. The dum, 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 dum. The minor third just repeats itself constantly. Do you want me to share the middle section?
The female choir
the female section.
Yeah, because this starts to do the same thing. It starts off with an E minor, and this is what to me sounds like the foundation theme. This to me sounds like it's, you could almost, if somebody merged this and went from this into the foundation main title music, it would seem like the same piece of music to me.
Yeah, this is.
I haven't worked out exactly what part of it is doing that, but.
Maybe, when it goes up to when we were speaking originally, those big kind of chords, maybe because that's very dissonant as well.
But again, I think even then it was still this kind of chromatic mediant where you're shifting to a third above or below, but you're doing it you're borrowing from a key that doesn't share the same notes. So, it's like going from a C major to an A flat major, or C to an E flat major, something like that, where there's a third relationship between the roots of the chords, but there are not completely shared notes between them. It's very characteristic of film music generally nowadays, but it gets used a lot in foundation. It gets used a lot here.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting in this middle section as well is the opening interval of this, the da, 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 da. You've got that minor third yet again.
Mm-hmm.
So this note here, which is an A, falls down to an F sharp. So again, this minor third features before utilizing a fifth, what we spoke about with the dwarven music, kind of like if you played both those notes together, it would sound hollow and empty, but there's also be a strength to it. If you play an electric guitar with a bit of distortion, you've got a power chord as well. But it suddenly drops from F sharp minor to F minor as well, which is just this slow sinking feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Falling back in C sharp minor, A minor, E minor, B minor 7 from what I've worked out, F sharp minor, and just blasting straight into D. Minor, I should
D
say.
minor, yep. Yeah.
But again,
back to the minor, yeah.
F to D, the third again.
Yeah.
Constantly, it's there.
And that's the point when you get back to that D minor, that's the point where all of a sudden the roles are reversed, the male choir comes back in, but now it's almost entirely rhythmic, right?
Mm.
At that point, it's just doing the da, 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 all on one note. And the horns have taken over, the trombones have taken over the main theme then.
Yeah, so they take over with a bit of
the dun 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 dun. Yeah,
beautiful. They take over the main theme. But yeah,
and then the ostinato strings keep building up, layering octave and octave. Like it's in the cellos initially, then the viola's an octave above, then the second violin's an octave above that, and then the first violin's an octave above that, and so you end up having this swelling ostinato underneath everything.
And like Sarah was saying about like the John Williams influence the ostinato for Duel of Fates. That builds up by octave on octave as well. And he admits it's on the Wikipedia page for him as well. That, I mean, there isn't really a film composer who doesn't say that John Williams is an influence. But it's also kind of like he's part of the musical backcloth of Hollywood. It's very hard to go through training as a film composer without actually touching on John Williams or Hans Zimmer's music. It's just not heard of. It'd be like doing an English literature course at a English university in England and not covering the Victorians or the Romantics or the Modernists or Shakespeare. Like John Williams and Hans Zimmer are categorically the two composers you will definitely come across in your training.
Yeah.
Anything more?
That was a lot. That was really detailed.
Just kind of like slipped off there.
I know.
I think I've finally come to an end.
I think,
yeah. It's good.
I don't think I have much more to say.
No, I think you guys unpacked it all really well. I think like the last thing that I would like to highlight before we close, though, is like probably my one dissatisfaction with the theme, which was the callback to Shore and his use of these like Eastern modes. Because I actually like what Shore does, because Shore doesn't necessarily associate them solely with Mordor and with the evil themes. Because again, like as you mentioned, I think James, it was you who mentioned it's used in the Lothlorien theme. It's used in Mirkwood as well. There's one part that sounds very, very Middle Eastern in Beyond the Forest. It's like so it's like it's used between cultures, and like I actually have less of a problem with how Shore uses it than with what we've heard so far from the score of Per McCreary, because it seems very much to kind of like by having this stuff as like the underbelly of Sauron's theme, but not incorporating it all in Galadriel's theme. It kind of makes it almost like a diametric opposition between the two, and like. For me, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of using Eastern modes in order to other an enemy and create an oral association with an enemy, because I think there are other ways to unsettle. You know, you can go Piero Lunaire on them and use chromatics that are kind of like all over the place. And there's other stuff that we've talked about that he does use, you know, in the score to make the music unsettling and make it uncertain. But I just in this scenario, since he's not gone the way of Shore, where he's using this theme kind of like universally, regardless of which culture or race he's representing, since he's using it for a specific one, I'm a bit like, I'm hoping that when we get the rest of the score, we'll see these modes used in other themes for different regions, different cultures, because otherwise I'm just iffy of if the only Eastern themes are the ones that are associated with the enemy. That's a bit weird for me. So I just wanted to make a comment on that, since we were talking so much about modalities earlier.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes there is that there's a little bit of a history with that as well. But it comes into kind of like you could link it back to like Edward Said's book on Orientalism, as well, and this idea of the villain, the enemy, being portrayed as other with a capital O, as well. I kind of there's the Film Tracks review website, remember, kind of picked this up. Why does Drew, what's his name? Drogo? Why does Drogo from How to Train Your Dragon 2 have an Eastern an Eastern styled melody.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems a bit out of place. But there's unfortunate, I'm using the word unfortunately, there is a little bit of a history in Western music of using modes and scales in good and bad scenarios like you have been highlighting.
Yeah. I think kind of like going forward, regardless of like where we see this score, I feel like just in general in the Western musical tradition, this is something that I think musicians of our era can look at a bit more like critically and perhaps start to move away from, like devising our own versions of, within the Western musical tradition, because that's what I was primarily educated into, is kind of like, finding our own ways to represent, darkness. We've already talked about some of those, right? We've talked about like chord progressions or intervals that evoke these like negative emotions. And I feel like this is actually an opportunity for innovation within the Western musical tradition, for us to innovate, like, what else can we associate with evil and with darkness without having to draw on music from a non-Western musical tradition in order to create that, as you said, Will, capital O, othering. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's an unfortunate thing, but at the same time, I also see it as an opportunity for present composers to be like, hey, we can actually challenge this and innovate our musical tradition too. And yeah, I guess that's kind of how to like wrap up this point on a positive note.
Well, I want to thank all three of you so much for being a part of the panel. I don't want to cut off the conversation. Instead, I would encourage you, if you have anything else to contribute. I did want to quickly shoehorn in a question from one of our listeners. Claire Moore asked, have any of you tried to compose your own music with Tolkien-like themes?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I think all of us have.
Okay, so follow up that I'm just creating just now. How far did you get along? Did you like create your own single song, or did you have like a whole suite that you composed, or did you have like a whole symphony that you wrote just for Tolkien themes? How far did you get?
I have a lot of sketches and playing around with sort of the development following the story. So, for example, I wrote a piece a couple of years ago that was about Elwë and Melian meeting, but then I drew aspects of that out for a theme for Doriath, including battles in the first age. So just playing around with the sort of leitmotif idea as well. And I would love to continue. One of the things I would love to do is then continue to do that, develop themes around Beren and Luthien that make reference to the Melian music and so on, all the way down to Arwen and Aragorn, but being able to reference all that. So that's one of the really fun things for me is to sort of try to imitate the complexity of the legendarium in the relationship between the musical themes, but certainly nothing that I could present an entire piece. It's more just a lot of sketches.
I think I would echo that. Sketches, like I said, I think right near the beginning, I tried. I think, to be honest, actually, I tried to do a theme for Numenor. My first sketch for that probably exists from over a decade ago, and then I came back to it recently, and I can come up with a melody. Not necessarily the best melody, but I can come up with a melody. I can put some harmony to it and make it work. But it's kind of like, where do you go from there? Like possibly filler music or developing the theme. And sometimes, like if you've got an orchestra, it can be a bit easier because you can, like Beethoven's really good at this. The Eroica Symphony, you've got the dum da dum da 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 da. Then he just passes it between all of the instruments. Da 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 ba da 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 da. So before you then, and it just feels so effortless. And that's something I kind of struggle with. But I've got Numenor. I don't think I've tried anything with the Hobbits. Wizardry. I also was, as is kind of linked into my upcoming paper. on romantic mountaineering in Middle Earth. Please stay tuned at Oxenmoot. Or the New Romanticisms Conference, if you're going to that next month. I've also tried to kind of like do something a bit more with the nature and the natural ecological side of Middle Earth, like mountains. The idea of a mountain in Middle Earth is something I'm exploring a lot at the moment, and it's not as straightforward as anyone would imagine. They don't just exist randomly. Like the way he utilizes them and how people engage with them, how people see them, how they exist in dreams is very fascinating. But that's a tangent that I would not want to go into right now. I'll talk too long.
For me, it's interesting because actually most of what I've done with Tolkien. So when it comes to my classical compositions, they tend to not be about Tolkien. And what I've explored more is because I'm both a composer and a writer, so I tend to explore Tolkien more through my through like songwriting, as in like popular songwriting. And so I'll come up with lyrics with words that are representing what I'm trying to talk about, and then word paint with the music to use the technique that's used by Schubert and all the other composers in the 19th century, composing Lieder and that kind of genre of music, but kind of in a way that works with modern songwriting. And so that's something that I've done for a few different themes. I've written about the crossing of the Helkaraksay, using particular bells that sound so much like hollowed ice when you strike them. I don't remember the exact name of them, but it's very cool. So using that kind of like word painting stuff, or a song that was loosely inspired by the fall of Numenor, using descending scales to illustrate the notion of a descending wave, that kind of thing. The only instrumental Tolkien inspired piece that I've made was part of a cycle of these songs, and it was supposed to introduce kind of the series of songs, and it was inspired by the music of the Ainur, and it was. I'm not going to say like it was a particularly like innovative or interesting melody, but again, I like to use use instruments in ways that evoke feelings and like images. So for example, for this music of the Ainur piece, it was using anvils because the notion was to create, how do I illustrate the concept of a demiurge? Because that's what the Valar are to me. They're creating the universe that Eru has told them to create, kind of thing. So, for me, like anvils, they sound like forges, they sound like magma coming up from under the sea to form new land, kind of thing. So it was that sort of idea, and I do actually have a score for that. So one day we can break it down with the score of that piece. But yeah, for me, it's more songwriting that merges with my poetry, I guess you could call it verse rather. Let's call it verse. Songwriting that merges with my verse rather than instrumentals, at least for Tolkien stuff.
So we didn't have any more direct questions necessarily in the chat. A lot of comments just kind of showing appreciation or echoing what you guys said back and forth, and how much they appreciated the time and the topic here. So I just kind of want to echo those comments and say personally, thank you all so much for giving of your time and sharing with us your wonderful thoughts on the music of the Rings of Power. Did any of you have any final thoughts?
I can't wait for the album.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. Looking forward to the rest. Yes.
Yeah, it will be really exciting to have new music. And it's always exciting to have Howard Shore come back. I don't know how I necessarily feel about, and I felt about this with John Williams coming back to do the theme for Obi-Wan as well. Like, they've hired a composer. Why are they getting, the old name into it? But based on the music we've got good so far, I'm very hyped, very excited.
Excellent. So we might have to all come together again once we have the rest of the album to talk some more. And who knows, it might be 6 hours long by then.
1 hour per track, surely.
Yeah.
at the very least, we'll have an extended edition too for the Ultra Music.
I'm going to have to take a month off just to transcribe them.
I'm just going to be sick.
Yeah. All right. Again, thank you all so much.
We are so thankful that we have such gracious scholars and fans who want to share their Tolkien experience with us and with you.
We really enjoy making these podcasts, and the fun doesn't stop here.
That's right, it continues on social media. You can find us on Facebook as Tolkien Experience and Twitter as @TolkienEXP. Don't forget to like, follow, share, and comment because we love interacting with you just as much as we enjoy talking to our guests.
For even more content and to join our fellowship of supporters, check out our Patreon by going to patreon.com/TolkienExperience. Finally, you can also follow our personal Twitter accounts. I'm @LukeB.Shelton.
I'm @SR Westvik.
And I'm @Aaron L. Palmadill. If you have questions or comments, you can send them to us by email at tolkienexperience@gmail.com.
If you want to know more about this week's guest, we provide show notes at tolkienexperience.com. You can find the podcast on all major podcast services, including Apple, Stitcher, and YouTube. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, and we truly hope that, in a way, it contributes to your own Tolkien experience.